Welcome to the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Edufaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information, resources, and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with disabilities who receive services under Section 504 or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, response to intervention and the multi-tiered system of support, English speakers of other languages, and related diverse learner categories. Edufaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness and promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing information and topics about non-traditional learners. Edufaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge, because we all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. I am your host, Dr. Nakia, sending you good vibes and thanking you for joining me for another episode of the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Let's dive in for our April episode. Let's remember the why of Edufaith: education, EDU, and faith, trusted and believing in one's ability. To learn more, go to www.edufaithconsulting.com. Let's start with our Edufaith inspirational story. Story today, we're going to celebrate resilience and achievement and the boundless potential of students with exceptionalities. At Edufaith, we believe that every student has the ability to soar beyond expectations, and today's episode is dedicated to those who exemplify this truth. This month, we are highlighting an extraordinary group of students who have been recognized for the 2025 Yes, I Can Awards, aligned with the Council for Exceptional Children's Conference. These awards celebrate children and youth with exceptionalities who have overcome challenges and made remarkable contributions in academics, arts, self-advocacy, technology, and community service. Their achievements remind us that disabilities do not define potential, determination, passion, and opportunity do. Let's take a moment to honor this year's outstanding awardees of the 2025 Council for Exceptional Children's Conference Award members. For excellence in art, we have Ashton Doss and Jacob Jack Draper. These young artists have harnessed the power of creativity to express themselves and inspire others. Their work proves that art is a language that transcends barriers. For achievements in academics, we have two wonderful candidates and award winners, Joseph Brignett and Grace Fowler. With unwavering determination, they have excelled in their studies, proving that learning has no limits when fueled with perseverance. For impact in community and school activities, we have Matthew Jocalier and Daniel Rogers. These students have shown that leadership and service can create lasting change in their schools and beyond. For advocacy and self-empowerment, we have Krishangi Shroff and Obed West. These champions have used their own voices, and they have advocated for themselves and others, ensuring that students with disabilities are seen, heard, and valued. For innovation and technology, we have Kenya Rodriguez and Joanna Vincent. The power of technology. These students have shown that they can enhance this power to enhance their learning and pave the way for accessibility in education. And for transition, we have Amanda Hanshaw and Joy Wei Lau, and they have proven that they are awesome in the workplace and in transition once you leave school, that they can do great things despite any obstacles they may face. Congratulations to all of our 2025 Yes, I Can awardees. I was blessed to meet these wonderful individuals in person at this year's CEC Conference, and I participated in a question and answer session. And these students were so poised, so sweet, so awesome. I attended the CEC Awards and saw them get their awards, and it was just a great experience. I have more information and pictures on the Edufaith Consulting site for the month of April, our CEC awardees. I want you to continue to inspire, continue to persevere. Your stories are a testament to what is possible when we remove barriers, embrace inclusion, and provide the right support. As educators, parents, and leaders, we can see how we can foster an environment where every student feels empowered and say, yes, I can. To all our students and listeners today, remember, you are capable, you are powerful, you are limitless. Keep believing in yourself, and when challenges arise, remember the incredible young people we honor today, because like them, you can achieve greatness. And that is it for our Edufaith inspirational story. I will have that link on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page with additional information and pictures on the Edufaith Consulting website. Congrats once again to our awardees. Let's get started with our dates to remember for the month of April. April is Parkinson's Awareness Month in the United States. It is Paralyzed Veterans Across America Month in the United States. It is National Donate Life Month in the United States, Child Abuse Prevention Month, Counseling Awareness Month, Financial Literacy Month, Mathematics and Statistics Awareness Month, Multilingual Learner Advocacy Month, National Internship Awareness Month, National Occupational Therapy Month, National Volunteer Appreciation Month, Poetry Month, National School Library Month, Autism Acceptance Month. For our week-long observances for the month of April, April 2nd through the 8th is Autism Acceptance Week in the United Kingdom. April 6th through the 12th is National Library Week. April 7th through the 11th is National Assistant Principals Week. Let's celebrate our assistant principals. They work hard in the school. April 21st through the 25th is After School Professionals Appreciation Week. And April 21st through the 25th is also National Public School Volunteer Week. Our daily observances and dates to remember in the month of April. April 2nd is World Autism Awareness Day in the United Nations. April 3rd is Paraprofessional Appreciation Day. Let's celebrate our paraprofessionals, our parapros who help support our students and our teachers in the classroom. April 4th is National School Librarian Day. Let's celebrate our librarians as they bring that love of literacy to us all. April 5th through the 13th is National Robotics Week. April 6th is National Library Week, and that begins the week of April 6th through the 12th, as I mentioned. April 7th is World Health Day, United Nations. April 10th is National Youth HIV and AIDS Awareness Day. April 11th is Parkinson's Disease International Awareness Day Global. April 12th through the 20th, Passover begins. April 13th is Sarcoidosis Awareness Day globally. April 17th is World Hemophilia Day, United Nations. April 20th is Easter Sunday. Happy Easter. April 20th also is the day that Passover ends. April 21st is National Public School Volunteer Week that begins. April 22nd is Earth Day. April 22nd is National School Bus Driver Appreciation Day. April 23rd is Administrative Professionals Day. Let's celebrate our secretaries. Thank you all for all that you do to help us bosses keep it together. April 25th is Arbor Day. April 25th is World Malaria Day. April 28th is World Day of Safety and Health at Work in the United Nations. And April 29th is World Wish Day, which is a global day. And that is it for the month of April. April is a busy month. April showers bring May flowers. And then I almost forgot, April 1st is April Fool's Day. So let the fools come out and let the jokes begin. That is it for our dates to remember for the month of April. These dates will be posted on the Edufaith Consulting website. And let's shift to our next portion. Now let's shift to essential news. For essential news for today, I have no new updates from the U.S. Department of Education. In reviewing the Office of Special Education Programs and the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, there are no new updates from the last podcast. In lieu of that, I'm going to take this essential news segment to celebrate and provide a highlight of the 2025 Council for Exceptional Children's Conference and provide essential news and a recap of that. The 2025 Council for Exceptional Children's Conference, Convention and Expo was in the vibrant city of Baltimore, Maryland, and it became the epicenter for thousands of passionate special education professionals, leaders, parents, and paraprofessionals from all corners of the globe. This year's event was all about collaboration, inspiration, and cutting-edge advancements that are shaping the future of education. Some key highlights from the convention include innovation, a lot of AI information, a lot of dynamic sessions with educators, administrators, and researchers who had minds open to research-backed strategies designed specifically to uplift and empower students with disabilities and gifted learners alike. Attendees dove into hands-on workshops. There were lively, engaging networks. There were discussions, talks, and all types of different activities that were thought-provoking and centered on best practices in special education. There were some keynote speakers And panel discussions. One of the panel discussions was AI's game-changing role in special education. And that was one of the most electrifying sessions that was there. And then there was another keynote session that talked about AI, and it says envisioning tomorrow for all learners, AI revolutionizing the education. The focus of those sessions provided the groundbreaking influence of artificial intelligence and AI in special education. It showcased how AI-powered tools are revolutionizing teaching, personalizing learning experiences for students, and enhancing assessments for students with exceptionalities. There was also another keynote speaker. Her name was Casey Watts, Dr. Lisa Decker, Dr. James Basham, Dr. Trey Vasquez III. And that panel took a deep dive into the world of AI, sharing real-world applications that helps educators seamlessly integrate these tools into the classrooms, fostering inclusive and effective learning environments. Some unforgettable takeaways from the conference included a lot of just different treasure troves of knowledge and information for anyone in special education or general education teachers. There was a lot of fresh, actionable strategies to implement in the classroom, innovative insights from the brightest minds of education, expanded professional networks with peers from all over the world, and then there were creative resources to ignite student success. There are a lot of different expos in a big room, and you can go in and see all the innovation and technology and EdTech and all types of resources that help support students with exceptionalities. From technology-driven techniques to inclusive teaching methods, the convention provides the vital importance of continuous learning, collaboration, and championing the needs of students with disabilities. It was a wonderful experience. I had a blast in Baltimore, Maryland. I went and ate some crab cakes. I hung out. I did my presentation. It was very successful. And just the whole conference is just really empowering. It equips educators, parents, and leaders with knowledge and tools to elevate special education practices. And it helps us grow in our field, and we evolve. And these events we attend help us grow in our professions and ensure that we continue to remain committed to our students with exceptionalities and give them the support they need to continue to shine. And that wraps up the essential news for today. The recap for the Council for Exceptional Children's Conference, which was in Baltimore, Maryland, 2025. I will have the link to the conference on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, and you can go in and see the pictures and the photos, and it was just a wonderful experience. It was very empowering, the entire conference. And that is it for our essential news for today. Now it's time for essential knowledge. And in the spirit of the CEC Conference, what I'm going to do today is have a two-part podcast to present and recap what I presented along with my two fellow co-hosts at the conference. We presented on the first day on March 12, 2025, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock p.m. And I was a part of a collaborative session with two wonderful ladies. The title of our session was Essential Tips for Leadership, Navigating Disability Compliance, and Reading Policy Through Sense-Making Strategies. I presented with Elizabeth Zagata, and she is a Special Education Systems Improvement Specialist at West Ed, and Randy Stone, who is a Professional Development Specialist, really great reading, and adjunct professor at American University. We had an hour to present, and we all worked really hard together. And throughout the presentation, we all presented for 15 minutes on our particular parts. Today, I'm going to recap my portion of the session at the CEC Conference. And then on the next podcast, I will have Elizabeth and Randy come and present and discuss their portion, and then we'll all bring it together on the second part of the podcast. So here's Dr. Cotton's or Dr. Nakia's recap for today. This was the title of the session. Once again, Essential Tips for Leadership, Navigating Disability Compliance, and Reading Policy Through Sense-Making Strategies. And the outcomes for this were to enhance understanding and build self-efficacy of Section 504 and special education fundamentals, including law, leadership, coordination practices, IEP and 504 plans, and processes for diverse learners receiving services under Section 504 and IDEA. The second outcome is to understand the current dyslexia policy landscape in the United States, including the research based on state-level dyslexia policy laws. And then the third outcome was to identify collaborative pathways within schools and districts for professional development that supports educator sense making around changing reading policy. Those were the three outcomes of the session. And as I dive into my portion, the first portion it was all about essential tips and essential tips for leadership. And my outcomes for that portion was to discuss key principles associated with special education, Section 504, and leadership from the Essential Tips books. Also highlighted key recommendations from the Essential Tips books, and then provided some tangible, diverse learner knowledge and basics. And at the end, I reflected on it and connected those tips to the professional education role aligned with dyslexia and how those services support students when you're working with students with dyslexia and you're serving in those leadership roles. Here I am at the conference getting ready to present, and here is my information. The first part of the conference, I started off with a little bit of data. I wanted to provide some data and some information from 2023 and 2024. And these are the IDEA facts. As we started off the conference, I wanted to provide just a little background. And in 2022 and 2023, 15% of students were in special education. And of those students, 66.17% of those students were ages 5 through 21. They received services inside of a regular class 80% or more during the day. When we look at the exceptionalities of students who have disabilities and which exceptionalities, as far as looking at the percentages, specific learning disability makes up 32%, speech and language impairment makes up 19%, and then other health impairment makes up the 15%, along with the other exceptionalities. So the top three exceptionalities for students, according to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the National Center for Education Statistics, are specific learning disability, which dyslexia falls under, speech language impairment, and other health impairment. When we look at other information, as far as Section 504 data and how many students are receiving services under Section 504, in 2020 and 2021, 1.6 million students received services under Section 504. And in that, the data revealed that 63% of those students with Section 504 plans, ages 6 to 21, spend 80% or more of their time in general education class. And it's actually more because when you think of students with Section 504 plans, they are considered general education students. So they're 100% in general education class. And this data was taken from 2017. Of course, we are now a couple of years down the line, so I'm sure those numbers have increased. But basically, the holistic approach to data and what I provided here is students being served under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and under Section 504 will be in a general education classroom. And it's really important for leaders and teachers to be equipped to work with our students with exceptionalities in these classroom conditions and be more apt to support our diverse learners. When looking at how this impacts special education leadership, many new building administrators find themselves suddenly thrust into situations in which they must be the final arbiter on matters related to strange sounding issues such as IEPs, 504 decisions, due process hearings, and IDEA compliance. This quote came from the Council for Exceptional Children's book on 2001, page 1. Due to the rapidly rising numbers of students being served in our general education class and our diverse learner growth, it is really important for anyone in leadership, any teacher, to be equipped to understand Section 504 and special education practices and understand their role in promoting protection for students with disabilities in the local school building. When I did a little research and I queried some challenges that Section 504 coordinators and special education leaders often face, the number one challenge under Section 504 challenges was training. Teachers and leaders need training to be able to support and differentiate the needs of all students. And in that research that I did, there was 67.9% of the students or of the participants, 67.9% of the participants noted that training was a big need in the school setting. In addition to that, and that data was taken in 2024. In addition to that, when we looked at other challenges in Section 504 implementation, That number was 26%, which was the highest number on my bar graph, and that was lack of professional development. So what does that tell you? That teachers and leaders need professional development and training and supporting students with Section 504 services. When we look at the data for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the challenges for special education, I asked two questions in which I did a little research. And the first question was, do you feel special education leadership? Do you feel that it is different? And 265 of the attendees out of 300 said, absolutely. When I asked what were the specific challenges of special education and leading special education programs, the highest number was staffing, so the teacher shortage. And then the next rank was other, which fell under professional development, along with professional development and compliance, which includes knowledge of laws. So when you think about the problems that leaders and teachers face, it's not having enough training and professional development to support diverse learners in the classroom and in the school setting. And that is some of my passion. That is why I wrote my books, Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders and Essential Tips for Section 504 Coordinators, to serve as a platform to provide some resources, some guidance, and some training to help support our educators and leaders in those diverse learning settings for students who have Section 504 plans and IEPs. The next part of the presentation, I delved a little bit into the history, and in both of my books, Chapter 2 aligns with the history of special education and Public Law 94 and 142, and the history of the Office of Civil Rights in regards to the Section of 504 Rehabilitative Act of 1973. Chapter 2 talks about how in 1973, Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act, was established. In 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Act law was signed into place, Public Law 94 and 142. And because of those laws, that's how students were allowed to come to school and become inclusive in the classroom setting. Prior to that, students were excluded from classrooms. So if a student had a disability, they weren't allowed to go to school, or the parent had to place them in a private school setting or keep them home. So it wasn't until 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Act, once that was signed into place, that's when inclusion became a part of the school process. And now that is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which was enacted from PL 94-142, the IDEA in 1990, which includes that students with disabilities should be included. And in order to document that, that's where we've come up with the individual education plan to document those services for students to be in the classroom, inclusive in the general education setting. This also was aligned with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Today, we have the Americans with Disabilities Amendment Act. We have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And then we have Section 504 plans under the Office of Civil Rights to require compliance for school districts to make sure that diverse learners receive the services that they are privy to that are going to help them in the least restrictive environment. And Chapter 2, the whole goal of that was to show, as a leader, as a teacher, how will the historical knowledge impact you in the position that you're in now? How can you change the trajectory in your school building and your culture to foster an inclusive environment? How do you advocate for an inclusive culture for your students and your teachers and your parents and your community? That was Chapter 2. And that's just all about the history in both books, Essential Tips for Leaders and Essential Tips for Coordinators and Essential Tips for Educators. The history is, now that we know what happened in the past, how are we going to change the future? The next couple of chapters, chapters 3 and 4, chapters 3 in the Coordinators book and chapter 5 in my Essential Tips for Leaders book is all about knowledge. And that's where I go into the different programs. I explain what an IEP is. I explain positive behavior supports. I explain what a functional behavior assessment is, and all of those things that'll equip leaders and teachers and even parents to make you knowledgeable with diverse learner services. Just want to read a quote. Research suggests that most educators lack the coursework and field experience needed to lead local efforts to create learning environments that emphasize academic success for students with disability. And that is a quote from DePola to Shannon Morin, 2003, page 11, Katniss, 1996, and Parker and Day, 1997. When you think about that, that is why the Knowledge is Power chapters are very instrumental in the book. And it provides a recap and a breakdown of all the learning services for students with exceptionalities in the books in schools. As I mentioned, the MTSS process, differentiated instruction, 504 plans, IEPs, breaking down the parts of IEPs. All of that information is in Captain Knowledge is Essential in the books. When we look at when we recap this and think about what role it aligns with leadership, building leaders are responsible for communicating with families and teachers about special education services, promoting disability awareness, and monitoring and evaluating special education decisions and services, and ensuring legal compliance. And that was from the CEC in 1997, 2001, and Pakek and Fulwell in 1999. Essential knowledge is very essential, and I highlight that information in the book. And one other thing I also provide is an explanation of the different acronyms and the vocabulary aligned with the Office of Civil Rights and IDEA. That's all broken down in the books. Chapter 3 in my Essential Tips for Leaders book is all about relationships. And then in the Essential Tips for Coordinators, I also talk about and discuss relationships. And that is really a thick chapter in the book, in that we have to have those relationships. The influence of relationships is powerful in leadership. It's powerful as a teacher. It's powerful as a parent. It's powerful as a human. But I do want to point out, as a diverse learner leader, you would need the relationships with your state agency, with your district staff, with your parents, with your administrators, with your teachers, with your clerical staff, and then more important, with your students. You need these relationships in order to be successful in the school setting and to be a holistic leader to ensure that learners receive the services that they need. You have to build upon these relationships in order to be successful in your role. And then chapter 4, I'm going to pivot from chapter 4. In chapter 4, I discuss impairments. And when we think about Section 504 in IDEA, under Section 504, an impairment is defined as a physical or mental impairment, and it's any type of physiological condition, or it could be a mental impairment, emotional or mental illness, or specific learning disability. So that is a Section 504 impairment under Section 504, and it's under the provision of 34 CFR 104.3 J2I. That is the regulation that is under. When we think about Individual Disabilities Education Act and under IDEA, impairments are listed, and there are 13 categories of impairment. And when we think about impairments, I mentioned them at the beginning with the data, but when we're looking at for today, I'm just going to highlight specific learning disability, other health impairment, autism, and speech and language impairment. For the purpose of the training, I was aligning all of this with dyslexia, and these are the categories in which a person with dyslexia would fall under the IDEA category. So it would be specific learning disability, other health impairment, autism, or speech language impairment. They can receive services under those categories. When we think about the science of reading and dyslexia facts, we're going to shift to dyslexia, because for the next part of the podcast, that's when Elizabeth and Randy are going to come in and hone down and highlight dyslexia and provide some specific details about dyslexia. But I do want to open up the conversation when we think about dyslexia fact, and I know I've done a podcast on dyslexia, so go take a look and listen to that podcast again. And then in February, I did a science of reading in which I covered some of this information as well. 1 out of 10 people have dyslexia. There are 780 million people in the entire world who are dyslexia, and more than 40 million of U.S. adults have dyslexia, while only 2 million of them having a diagnosis. So there are a lot of people with dyslexia in our world. When we think about this, between 70% and 80% of people with dyslexia are limited with reading proficiency, and about 60% of individuals with dyslexia are men. And that came from the Discovery ABA in 2023 data. Dyslexia is a learning disability and a neurological condition that makes it difficult for individuals to read, write, and spell. According to the International Dyslexia Association, dyslexia affects approximately 15 to 20% of the population, which means about 1 in every 5 individuals have some form of dyslexia. Additionally, as I mentioned, when we look at gender, boys are more likely to be diagnosed than girls, which explains why more men have it. 60% of men have it, because if boys are more likely to be diagnosed as girls when they grow up, that makes sense for the percentages of the men, which is really interesting. When we think of services for students with diverse learners, I mentioned the 13 categories, and then I mentioned the impairments under Section 504. If a student has an individual education plan and they have dyslexia, they can be served under an individual education plan. And in that individual education plan, it will provide that specialized instruction, goals, and accommodations tailored to the student's reading needs. Goals often include those 5 components of reading. And when you think of the 5 components of reading, I spoke about this at the on the February podcast. We have we have comprehension, vocabulary, phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. So students will receive goals aligned with those 5 components under those components of reading, or they may receive the specialized reading program to help support them with those 5 components of literacy. And then some services additionally within the IEP might be speech language therapy. There are a lot of assistive technology things to help support students with dyslexia, and even behavior supports, because behavior can be linked to students not being able to read. Now, if a student can't read or they have an academic deficiency, they may act out and they may become a part of their behavior because they're frustrated. So behavior supports can be aligned in the IEP if that behavior and that reading impairment impacts a student's behavior in the classroom. Under Section 504, remember I said it's a mental impairment and it impacts a major life activity. So when you think of dyslexia, you think of that mental impairment that affects learning. And in that, they may receive services under Section 504, which provide accommodations for students with reading disabilities. When we think of Section 504, that's going to be mostly accommodations, and it's not going to be specialized instruction. Whereas with the individual education plan, a student will receive specialized instruction with those goals and objectives. Under 504, they will pretty much receive accommodations and supports. And some of those accommodations may include extended time, alternative text, access to audiobooks. Those are just some recommendations. Of course, the schools will provide specific recommendations based on their curriculum and their infrastructure. And then I close it out with just essential tips for success. If you're a leader, teacher, here are some essential tips for success, even from my parents. You want to make sure that you accept and adjust, evaluate and prioritize, focus on success and learn from your mistakes, renew your mind, set those attainable goals, use the history to change the future, build your relationships, build your teams. I always say lead with your heart, which means leading with compassion and empathy, and remembering when you're in the school setting that this is someone's child. And then you always want to look at the perspective, how would I want somebody to treat my child with a disability? And then we want to make sure that we remain ethical and adhere to the IDE laws, OCR regulations, and remain in compliance. And then continue to grow. As we see, knowledge is power, and there is a need for training and professional development in these areas. So you want to make sure that you grab those resources, keep those resources close by, and stay current in the current trends so you can support and evolve as the times evolves in our schools to help support our students in the best way possible in which they're successful. And that was my recap of my portion of the conference, essential tips, the data, the chapter recaps, and then I aligned it all into dyslexia. Here are some additional photos from the conference. That is me at the top here, taking a picture in front of the CEC sign, me with Renee Gatsby, one of the wonderful people who helped coordinate the conference with the Council for Exceptional Children, me holding 3 of my books, me posing with a couple of participants who came up and asked some questions about parents and supporting parents. These are some additional networking district members who came up and talked and was inquiring about the books. Some of my friends from Cobb County School District who came to show me a little bit of love. This picture right here is Elizabeth, Randy, and I, right after the presentation. We were very happy. This is my wonderful picture in front of the CEC Conference entryway. And then there's some additional colleagues from Florida when I was a special education director in Florida, Rosalind Hall and Miss Kathy. And then that's me and my handsome husband, Colin, as he supported me by wearing the Edufaith shirt. We had a ball at the conference, and I will have additional pictures on the Edufaith Consulting website. For the next portion, we will have Elizabeth Zagata and Randy Stone, and they will speak on their portions of the podcast. And then I will close out the podcast. Now let's shift to our words of wisdom. And I decided to take a quote about dyslexia. The advantage of dyslexia is that my brain puts information in my head in a different way. And that is from actress Whoopi Goldberg. She has dyslexia. And it's just awesome to see the accomplishments that Ms. Goldberg has accomplished in spite of her disability. So she's a Yes I Can award winner as well. Part 1 of the CEC 2025 Essential Tips podcast. And I will see you next month for the next portion with our special guests, Elizabeth Zagata and Randy Stone.
You've got mail.
Now it's time for our essential advice, Ask Dr. Nakia, or Share an Inspirational Story. I want to use this platform to support and spotlight fellow educators, families, and community members. If you have a question, want advice, or to share a wonderful inspirational story on this podcast, feel free to email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAITH, the number 4ALL@gmail.com. Maybe read your letter, provide advice, or share your story on this podcast. Disclaimer, all listeners should adhere to district policies, follow protocols, remain ethical, and adhere to guidelines